Ladies and gentlemen, welcome 40 Watt Podcast. This is season 1, episode 44. Appreciate y'all. Y'all know I took a week off last week because I was out of town for a day job conference. I was out in Reno, Nevada. Didn't even have time to go to a music store while I was there. It was terrible. No, I went to a librarian conference. Yes, they exist. I know that sounds weird to you. We talk about all sorts of fun things. I'll explain it to you later. It's not worth talking on the podcast, but I am back this week. I'm super excited. Before we get into the interview with Rhett Shull, you already know this because you've looked at the title of the episode, so I'm not breaking it. No breaking news here. But I want to do some housekeeping. Remember to go over to our website, 40wattpodcast.com. You can find all the links over there to social media, to the Patreon, you can find my Reverb affiliate link over there. Click the links, do the things, like, subscribe, follow, bell icon, retweet, comment. There's more. I don't know what all the things are. Do all the social media things. You all know how social media works. So, remember, you can go over to patreon.com. You can support the show for as little as $3 a month. You can help make this magic happen every week, or almost every week, as we know. Sometimes I have to skip a week. But at $5 a month, you can get extra content every week. We're going to do extra episodes. You get that straight to your podcast player every week for $5 a month. It really helps make the show happen. I really appreciate all of my Patreon supporters over there. They help me, not lose as much money doing this because there are costs associated, overhead. So I do lose money doing this, and that's okay because I enjoy doing this. But it does give me an opportunity to give back a little bit. For example, 25% of my proceeds this year from Patreon will go to St. Jude Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. At the end of this season, I will total up how much I've brought in Patreon, 25%, write a check, I don't know, put in a credit card on a website. I don't know. I'll do something and give that money to St. Jude. And next year we'll pick a new charity. So if you've got a charity that you really love that you think would be a good one for me to next year donate 25% of my Patreon proceeds to, let me know and I'll do it. Lastly, I'm super excited about this one. So we're doing this at the beginning of this episode. This morning, when this episode drops, there'll be a post on my Instagram. Go check out that post. I'm doing my very first giveaway. We're going to do a fall giveaway. It was actually supposed to be a summer giveaway, but you'll find out why we had to put that off here in a second. So I've got 4 different companies that are teaming up with me to do a giveaway. We're going to give away a Caulfield Cables custom-made blue gold contact jack cable. I'm going to be giving away 4 custom-made, and I don't even have them out of the pack to show in the video, but 4 Honey Picks by Honey Picks, Rick Calhoun. They are actually laser engraved with my podcast logo, so you can use that as the grip. Also, String Joy is giving away 3 packs of whatever gauge the winner prefers. It'll be mostly like a gift certificate situation. And lastly, working together with Wampler Pedals, we're going to be giving away a Wampler Clarksdale, which is actually the perfect pedal for me to announce on an episode with Rhett Shull, considering how much he loves tube screamers. But for those of you that do know, my listeners, you'll know I'm from Clarksdale, Mississippi. This is named for my hometown because it is a pretty significant town in the history of blues music. And it actually has the image of the crossroads of Highway 49 and 61, which is in the town I grew up in. It's really cool. It was the pedal that got me into boutique pedals and boutique effects in general. So I'm really excited to give all these away. So how do you enter? Go find that post on Instagram. Like the post. Follow 40 Watt Podcast. Then, and this will all be in the details of the image. You'll see it, so you don't have to remember it now. You need to go follow those other companies. And you need to tag 2 friends in the comments of that post. Real simple. We're going to run it for about 2 weeks. So this Thursday, we're going to run it 2 Thursdays. After that, I'll announce the winner on the following podcast and get your contact information, mail it out to you, and you can have a rocking good time with new cable, pedal picks, and some new strings. So looking forward to working that with y'all. Go to the Instagram, follow the Instagram, click the post, all the things. Done. I know this is a little longer than usual, but I'm really excited about it. So, today's episode, I've got Rhett Shull himself.
What's up, man? I'm
How
well.
you doing, Rhett?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, dude. We've been trying to line this up for quite some time, but
I know. Well, it's not like you've been busy or anything. breaking
Yeah.
collarbones, buying houses, building studios.
I feel like when we first started talking about doing this was literally the week I crashed my bike and broke my collarbone, and I had to message you and be like, I'm not in a good state. I'm all jacked up on muscle relaxers and opioid painkillers, so it's probably not the best time.
Yeah, it was real close around that time. So yeah, it wasn't working. That's fine. I totally understood. And then of course followed that with buying a house, which is a huge deal. I know that's been on your table for a while.
This year, it's funny because this year's been a huge step forward in a lot of ways for Tilly and I and for the channel. And it's also been just a struggle because with all the stuff going on, I haven't had as much time to focus on the channel as I did last year, because all we did last year was sit at home. So,
Sure.
But yeah, so it's been an up and down roller coaster year. That's for sure.
No doubt. And now you're in the midst of a studio build. Been following that. So let's back up just a second. We're going to pretend, indulge me here. We're going to pretend that my hundreds of listeners don't know who you are. I realize that this is a major stretch of reality. There's probably a Venn diagram of a perfect circle inside.
I
of the
imagine
circle
our
of your
audiences
followers.
cross over pretty hard. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but to just for the sake of doing it, let's give the elevator speech 30,000 foot view. Who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a guitar player by trade. Spent the last 10 years, 11 years playing guitar for a living. Admittedly, for many of those years, it wasn't much of a living, but I, didn't have to have a day job, which is, cool. And I spent the last probably 9 years now, traveling with bands around, North America and some in Europe, and kind of cutting my teeth learning how to work in studios and do session work and all kinds of stuff. And then back in January of 2018, the gig I was on ended, as Nashville gigs tend to do. And sure. I decided that I wanted to finally try out the dream I had had for a few years of starting a YouTube channel. And I started making videos and kind of buckled down and decided that that's what I wanted to do for the foreseeable future. And yeah, it's taken off. Channel just hit 400,000 subscribers, which is crazy. So now it sounds weird to say, but I'm a full-time YouTuber and musician. So that's basically it. Yeah.
It's a wild world where that is a full-time gig. And it's a growing gig, and it's also it's funny as all this is still new to me, and like YouTube, it's like we were talking before we started going, it's like YouTube seems fun, but like I don't know that like I want it. It's like it's been played out, some of that, and it's having to shift. You're having to figure out what you're doing to keep it going. I've been talking to folks like Ryan Burke over at 60 Cycle Hum, and I've had Ryan from Demos in the Dark on the show, and it's interesting to talk to folks who have been doing this for a little while and how you've constantly got to have your antenna up to see how it shifts gears.
Yeah, and it can be tough at times. It's like a big sine wave. Okay, so at times when the channel's doing good and it's growing and you're releasing videos and it's connecting with the audience, it's great. And then inevitably something happens, the algorithm shifts, and then your videos kind of don't get as much traction, your subscribers slow down, then you got to try and figure out, well, wait, this type of video was working, now it's not working. Why is it not working? You're going back and digging through analytics, and it's it can be a struggle, but it's not that much different than being a musician, than being like a hired gun player trying to hustle for gigs. You go through seasons just like anything else. You go through seasons of growth. You go through seasons of slow growth or no growth at all. Yeah. It's part of the gig,
Yeah. See, and it's funny, we talked earlier, you had the intestinal fortitude, as they put it, to have the no plan B. I did the full-time guitarist thing for a while in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, and Southeast area. And you're right. Sometimes it's not much of a living at all. It's a hard time. There's no insurance in it. As I like to tell people, So I quit a while back. Not quit, I didn't quit playing entirely. Obviously, I still play as much as I can, but took a full time gig, and I admire those. I've got so many friends who are still plugging away, playing gigs, 4 or 5 times a week. Well, as much as they can now, but pre-COVID, 4 or 5 times a week, they're constantly gigging, and it's a hard. That's a hard job too. It's got to be about the same.
It's hard being on the road. I think my busiest year playing was probably 20. It was either 2016 or 2017, and I probably did, all told, between my different gigs and sessions and everything, I probably did 260 to 280 shows that year, between like local gig stuff, between being on the road, between church gigs, between local sessions. I was gone constantly, and I just got married that year. We got married in May of 2017, and that summer was nuts. So it's like I got married and then was just gone basically for the rest of the year. And it was fun. We got to do some incredible stuff. I got to play Ride Fest in Telluride, Colorado, which is a dream. It's amazing. And got to go play in Mexico twice in 2 weeks, which was a lot of fun. So we had some cool opportunities, but it was grueling. It was really, really grueling.
Yeah, no doubt. I just came back from this conference that I was at, and I had to, airports for an entire day, air hopping from city to city, time zone changes. And I only had to do it, 2 planes there, 2 planes back. And by the time I got back, I was like, I never want to get on a plane again.
Yeah, that year, I think I was flying 2 to 3 times a month, like out and back. Now, the advantage is living in Atlanta, we have the biggest airport in the world. So I had the ability to basically fly direct most places, depending on where we were going. But yeah, I was frequent flyer to the max. So yeah, when people talk about like flying with gear and flying with guitars and stuff, I've done it. I've been through almost every situation you can imagine with flying with gear and negotiating with gate agents. I've become a pro. So I'm about to fly to Germany to do a session, and I'll have to dust off my chops of talking to the gate agent, trying to negotiate. Hey, is there any way I could like get on the plane a little early? I just want to make sure my guitar gets on the plane and all this kind of stuff. Because you learn pretty quickly how to talk to someone when the fate of your guitar being on the plane or being under the plane is in jeopardy. You come like heart in hand and be like, hey man, anything you can do, I greatly appreciate it. Yeah.
I a few years back, so back in the mid 2000s, I was playing bass for this alt rock band, and we had some gigs in Los Angeles, and flew out there. First time I'd had to fly with a bass. Actually, I think it's the first time I'd had to fly with an instrument ever. And so flew out there, no problem. We played the gigs, spent 2 weeks in LA and Southern California. It was great. Actually, it wasn't great. Los Angeles is not my city, but that's fine. The shows went great. Then flew back. And when we got back, opened up my bass case in the airport, and the entire control cavity had been smashed in. And with a note in the the case that said, due to FAA regulations and search, we had to open your case to find such and such. Never got any compensation or closure.
Are you serious? They didn't do anything.
Nothing. Nothing. I talked to multiple people.
It's like, well, what are they gonna like? What are you gonna do, right? It's like it's the worst case scenario, because you have no leverage and you have no like. What are you gonna sue the TSA? Right. And they know that. They know. I mean, I flew to London a couple years ago and showed up, and it was my flight from Atlanta to Boston, so I know it was TSA, and somebody had completely ripped apart and dismantled my entire pedal board, which was dual lock. So they couldn't have done it by hand. They had to have some tool to get under there and rip up every single pedal and the switcher, the Boss switcher, all the cables in the back of the switcher. They just ripped it apart and then dumped everything back in the case, closed the case up, and sent it on its way. So all the pedals are rattling around inside. It's, don't fly with gear you care about, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And just, I mildly get it, where like, okay, I'm looking at my pedal board. Yeah, in an X-ray, I could see how that might look like an explosive device. But surely enough musicians fly with gear, especially you're talking like the Atlanta airport or like a Nashville airport you'd expect. Enough musicians fly with gear that they know what this stuff looks like. Like they've got a clue. They know what's going. I don't know. It. I was flying with some staff and I were flying to Fargo. We were actually flying back from Fargo, North Dakota, for a conference there. Which Fargo is there are people.
I was going to say, what is there to? I didn't
them.
know people had conferences in Fargo.
Yeah, no, it was wild. We, it's not to get way into my day job, but I'm part of a National Association for Small and Rural Libraries. So we tend to have our conference travel the country to different locations because a lot of these librarians and library staff are these tiny, tiny branches and tiny libraries that don't have a lot of funding, so they can't travel really far. So we try to put it in places that they can be accessible to. And so Fargo. Supposedly Fargo has a few 100,000 people that live there. I don't know where they hide them. Maybe underground. I went across the street to the mall because I don't remember what I needed, but I needed something, and walked across the street, across the highway, 4-lane highway, to the mall, like the big mall in Fargo. And I may have seen tens of people there. Maybe. It was wild. Nobody there, but we're flying back, and one of my staff that was with us has a CPAP machine. And the agent at the tiny Fargo airport just was baffled by this CPAP machine. And it was sure that this was an improvised explosive device of some kind, and he could not let it on the plane. I was like, are you serious? So flying is this big headache for me. I don't want to take a guitar on a flight if I can avoid it anymore, even though they pass regulations that say they have to let you take it on the plane. Even if it's kept in a coat closet or something like that, they don't care.
So word of advice to any of your listeners who might be traveling or thinking about traveling with instruments. It's about the airline that you book. So never, ever will I book a flight on United or American Airlines. Ever. Under any circumstances whatsoever, I'll drive before I fly United or American. Because not only do they not accommodate you or your instrument, they are borderline actively hostile towards you. And it's everybody. It's the gate agents. I had so many flight attendants, like I'd walk on the plane and ask, hey, is there a coat closet? Is there anywhere? And literally roll their eyes at me and be like, no, you're gonna have to put it, like, not even try to help me out. Delta and Southwest are the complete opposite. Delta always lets me on the plane early. They're super accommodating. They're super cool. So if you're going to fly with gear, you're going to fly with an instrument. Pro tip from your buddy Rhett, fly Delta, fly Southwest. This is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form.
But if anyone,
if Delta wants to reach out and
sponsor,
throw some Sky Miles my way,
I can be bought. I'm shameless. So help me cut into those expenses a little more. Flying with gear is one thing. Also, there's, travel. You travel a ton with gear. We've all done the trailer full of gear thing, which is it's its own thing. It's its own problem, host of problems. So that's kind of gone on hold. Obviously, not a lot of touring. I think I caught your Instagram live earlier today where you were talking about, basically don't have anything booked for the rest of the year right now.
Nothing. Not even into next year, but that'll change. I mean, usually with the bands that I play with Noah, specifically, I've only had one gin. I promise I'm fine. It's been a long day. Noah specifically, we usually get booked 2 to 3 months out, so he's probably going to be he's releasing his new record pretty soon. And so we'll be touring on that, probably getting into next year. And then, hopefully Jessie gets back out pretty soon. I haven't seen her in 2 years. I mean, we were talking about that on the live stream earlier. Wow. Jessie Wilson, who I've been touring with since 2015, was the Muddy Magnolias. Now she's her own solo artist. She's one of my closest friends, but January will be 2 years since I've even physically seen her. So somebody was asking in the live stream, like, hey, when's the last time you played with Jessie? And it's like, oh God, October of 2019. we did the Black Keys tour, and that's the last time I played with her.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
it's crazy, dude. It is crazy what the last year has done to this industry, you know?
So to pivot a little bit, I actually meant to talk about this. So Black Keys tour that you did, that's super cool. I'm sure you've seen the most recent album that Dan Albright put out, the Delta Cream. They did a bunch of shooting for that in my hometown and around my hometown where I grew up, because it's Mississippi Delta. So actually, you're the second person to be on this podcast that I know of that has played with Dan or on a tour with Dan. My buddy Eric Deaton, who has a Hill Country trio, he actually plays bass for Dan.
Oh, cool.
Which is super cool. Yeah, he played bass on that album, Delta
Dude,
Cream,
that's amazing. Yeah, I'm a huge Black Keys fan. I have been since 2000. Well, since Brothers came out. That was really what put them on my radar, and it's been really cool. That's been one of the things in my career so far that I look at and think like I kind of have to pinch myself, because it's a band that I idolize and look up to. Like Dan and Patrick are two of my favorite musicians of all time. They're as producers, they're amazing. So Pat Carney, the drummer from the Black Keys, produced Jesse's solo record. So I got to know Pat through that and got to work at his studio a little bit. And I remember in 2011 at Music Midtown, which is a big festival here in Atlanta, my best friend Andrew and I went. We were like 20 years old, 21 years old. I think I just graduated from AIM. I was like super green as a guitar player. And we went and saw the Black Keys. They were one of the headliners that night. And it was right in the Brothers touring cycle right before El Camino came out. And I remember standing in a crowd of like, I don't know, 70,000 people in Piedmont Park and watching the show with my jaw on the floor. Like, that's what I want to do. That right there. That music, that vibe to this crowd. Like, that's exactly what I want to do. And then, 8 years later, 9 years later, I'm standing in Pat's studio, like tracking guitars on some demos. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. But yeah, so that tour was a pretty surreal moment for me. We got to go out. It was like, I want to say 11 or we were out for 3 weeks, basically. It was us, Modest Mouse, and the Black Keys. And it was so much fun, man. It was so much fun. The band we were with, the crew, everybody we were out with was super cool. Everybody on their tour, the whole Black Keys staff, everyone was super nice. Their crew was super nice. It was like an ideal situation.
See, I remember getting into them when it was about time, mid 2000s when Magic Potion came out. And I think at that time they were still a Fat Possum artist. I think they were, and they were still recording over in Oxford, Mississippi at Matthew's studio over there, or outside of Oxford, Mississippi. And my memory's getting fuzzy, and I was going to look it up, but then decided I'm just going to admit to fuzzy memory. The album I think it's Magic Potion, or maybe it was a different album they did that was essentially an entire album of Kimbo covers,
it's the one that has
like
the pistol
Hill
on the cover. What's the record called?
I know. I went
Hold
completely
on, I'll
blank.
look it up. Because I should know this too. As much of a Black Keys fan as I am, I should know this record.
So yeah, I got really, really into them, and I was like,
Chulahoma.
Because Chulahoma, that's it. I should have known that. I should have absolutely known that. So got really, really into that stuff because I'm from the Mississippi Delta. Blues is kind of the thing, and of course, Hill Country blues is a totally different thing. But like, I've known, like, I never met R.L. Burnside or Junior Kimbrough. But I know basically all of R.L. Burnside's kids, and I've played with a bunch of them, Dwayne and Gary and Cedric and all those guys. And that kind of music, just there's something incredible about it. And so when I heard the Black Keys, it felt very like modern, meets that style. It's just a little more rock and roll, a little more put together is maybe the term, because if you listen to R.L. Burnside or Junior Kimbrough, I love it, but it's loose.
That's part of the vibe though. Like it wouldn't be as nearly as cool if it was like super tight and really like right on the grid. I mean, that's the appeal of that music is it really rides that line of being like almost completely out of tune, completely out of time, but it's not. And
Almost
it is.
trance-like.
And if you've ever tried to play it, and I think of like John Scofield the same way, you cannot sound like John Scofield. You can't do it. Nobody can. You can't do it. You can't sound like Junior Kimbrough. You can't sound like R.L. Burnside, because their music was so them, and their personality and who they were came through their playing and their singing and their bands. I mean, this is actually a lesson that I learned when Pat was producing Jesse, because when we were she did her first record, and we were they were shopping the record for a deal, and so we did a few showcases in Nashville. And so we did a bunch of rehearsals in Nashville, and Pat would come and basically produce the rehearsals, because he had produced the record. He had played basically everything on the record. And so he was kind of adamant about how the live band should sound. And this was a Nashville band with Nashville players. So everyone's top of their game, super clean, super tight. And that's how we were initially playing the music, was like really just punchy and in your face and dialed in. And I remember the first time he came to the rehearsal studio, SIR, there in Nashville, and I was, of course, super nervous, because this is Pat Carney. Like, I idolize the guy, basically.
It's a big deal.
And he walks over to me after we played the song. He goes, play me your part. And I'm sweating bullets. I'm like freaking out. And I'm like, okay, I played it. And he's like, that's not right. He's like, all right, turn that reverb off, change this. He starts like tweaking my pedal board on my sounds. He's like, now play it. Play it again. He's like, yeah, no, that's not right. You need to. Can I curse on this podcast? He's like, yeah, you need to fuck it up. He's like, you're playing it too clean. This is not clean. You need to fuck this up a little bit. Like, play it rough. It needs to sound rough. And it took me a while, honestly, not in the sense of like, oh, I'm such a great player. It was like hard to play bad. It was not that. It was like I didn't understand what he meant until the whole band kind of got the picture, and we really loosened up. And we were playing like real ham-fisted and kind of just in the, I don't know how, it's real greasy sounding.
That's the term that I always hear, is greasy. That's always the term.
And then when you listen back to the rehearsal recordings, you're like, oh, that's it. There it is. Right there. We got it right there. Everyone kind of had to like get this mindset of like, oh, I got to play the parts. I got to get the tones. Like, no. You just need to fuck it up a little bit. And that's where it's at.
It's that looseness. It's that like, it's where it words are hard. It's like that moment where you think this could all fall apart at any second, like that on the edge of that walking that line where this could all break down. That's that sound that I genuinely believe is what makes that hill country sound so important. So, I don't know, it grabs you. Like, I get it. People don't like 15 and 20-minute songs, and hill country loves to do that whole 15-minute drone one-chord song thing. But it isn't about listening to the song and a story. That looseness, that greasiness is the difference between you sort of bobbing your head and tapping your foot and you dancing your ass off.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Right. That looseness makes you shake your whole body. You can't help.
And that was a very valuable lesson that I learned specifically from that band in that time period and from Patrick Carney. Like that's.
I'm not great at that style. I'm not great at it, but I've played with some guys. I've played, like I said, with some of the Burnsides. There's another guy in the Delta named Bill Abel, who I've played with some. I've played guitar for him, and I've played some keys, some Hammond organ for him on gigs too, which Hammond organ in hill country blues is a whole other ball game. It's a wild thing to find parts to play, because it's very much, it's a single riff a lot of times, or if there's two parts to the tune, there's two riffs that you play the whole time, and you just lock in and you're there, and it's the most moving, like, I don't know. If you haven't experienced hill country blues, you need to experience it. It is not your Stevie Ray Vaughan BB King that you're used
honestly, to hearing. At the risk of pissing off a lot of people, I actually think it's kind of cooler in a lot of ways, because, Stevie and those guys, I think, in some respects, came up listening to that stuff. And a lot of my favorite artists, they are directly influenced by that music. And so I've grown a massive amount of respect for that hill country, low country blues, traditional American blues sound. And I don't at all pretend that I can play that or that is my sound. Yeah. It's not. And you know, that again, that's a lesson I learned on those sessions and on those gigs and watching guys like Pat and Dan. I think Pat and Dan do get that thing. That is their sound and that is their thing. And they understand it. They've studied it. They have a respect and a reverence for it. You can hear it on the Delta Cream record. Like they get it. My friend Eric, my friend Eric Zapata, the guitar player for Gary Clark Jr. He's become a good friend of mine, and he's another one of those guys, like from Austin, Texas, like from Austin. He understands that sound. And so what I've tried to do over the last couple of years is surround myself with people that are steeped in that and have studied that and understand it and try and learn from them. So I get Zapata to turn me on to records and, you know, listen to what those guys are saying, because to me, all the bands I love are directly correlated to that sound. And as an American, that's like, you know, that's our one true art form. That's like the one true art form that this country has given the world is blues and jazz, right? That's a traditional American, African-American art form, right? And so I think absolutely as Americans and as guitar players and as musicians, you know, who are interested in that style of music, I think you have to kind of have a reverence and a respect for it in order to play it right.
And you gotta go backwards and you gotta go backwards and learn it. And, you know, coming from the Mississippi Delta, like, I may have told the story already, but I'm going to mention it because you probably have not heard it, obviously, because we haven't talked about it before. But, you know, like Ike Turner is from where I'm from. You know what I mean? Actually, there's a cool story that I mess up the details. I think Ike Turner's mom was a midwife and delivered my grandmother.
Wow.
Like, it's a wild story. Neither here nor there. But like, and that's when you talk about blues and people talk about all these different styles, you know, there is a Texas blues. There's the T-Bone Walker thing that grew into. Actually, it's really funny because T-Bone Walker was Texas blues, but he influenced B.B. King, who sort of became what Delta blues is remembered as because he's from the Delta, but the Delta blues was really the acoustic Robert Johnson style thing, or the Lonnie Johnson, not Lonnie Johnson. Who's the other Johnson? Tommy Johnson. That's it. And then there's that crazy hill country thing that's over in the hills where it's drony and drawn out, and it's this beautiful, beautiful thing that you've got to go backwards, find those styles. If you really want to get into it, you want to feel it, you want to know what's going on, you got to go backwards, you got to listen to it, then you got to find the people still playing it. Because you're not going to learn it trying to play the licks off the record. You're going to have to find somebody
because they don't ever play it like that again. That record was like how they played it that day in that moment with that sound. But if you go and see them play the same song, it's not going to sound like that.
Nope, it's not. The lyrics are going to change a lot, a lot. So anytime someone tells me, "Oh, those aren't the lyrics to that song," I said they weren't that day.
Yeah,
you know. So it's really fun. I really love. Anytime I hear guitar players, and you hear it on the internet a lot, people dissing blues music, I'm like, you just haven't dug in enough.
And I think a lot of people's experience and expectation of blues is like what I call dad blues, or like barbecue festival blues. You know what I mean? Like you can probably picture that sound in your head if I say like barbecue festival blues.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with it, but I think what you and I are talking about is a different thing to that, right?
I used to run sound at Ground Zero Blues Club in Clarksdale, and we had this one guy that would get booked there. That he is like, if you looked up dad/barbecue blues in the dictionary, he is the poster child. Right. Late 60s, white guy, cowboy hat. White Strat into a Fender amp with a tube screamer with the gain cranked. And I had to actually tell him, please stop with the pitch harmonics.
I try to live by this mantra. Sometimes it's more difficult for me, but whatever blows your skirt up, and that sound,
Yeah, I mean,
that sound, hey man, and if that guy is, if that is his sound and that is what he's doing and that's what makes him happy and that's his expression, then that is just as valid as anybody else's sound or expression. But talking about Clapton, like I love Cream, I love the Bluesbreaker record, and then aside from the Unplugged record, which one could definitely classify into the dad blues category, there's not much Clapton that I really like and listen to. And I'm partial to the Unplugged record because that's my first memory of music. My parents had it on cassette. I was born in 1990. I think that Unplugged session was 90, 91, something like that. My parents had it on cassette and it stayed in the car. So from the years 1 year to 3 years old, when I was in the car, I was listening to Eric Clapton Unplugged. And so that music has a, pretty solid place in my heart. But
sure, emotional connection.
But I like Cream, which is way different than Clapton's later stuff in the 70s and especially the 80s,
See, I extend it a little further, and I've said this on the podcast, so I'm not being controversial because they've heard me say this. I like Clapton until he got sober and started playing a Strat.
That is not an unpopular opinion. Just like it is not unpopular.
It's more popular than you think. But I like Blind Faith. I like Derek and the Dominoes. But everything once he went solo, and it's like there'd be moments of, oh, that's pretty cool. Like Road to Escondido.
Yeah, that record's
JJ
awesome.
was
I
good.
love that record. I was in high school
record.
when that came out, and that was great.
I even like sort of the campiness of Riding with the King with B.B. King. You know what I mean? There's a little, I don't know, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, very kind of stereotypical bluesy, but it's B.B. King. That'll always be the soft spot in my heart for B.B. King. But I got to open for him a couple of times and actually watch the procession when he passed away come through the town I was living in at the time as they took him to the cemetery. It was a surreal moment. Actually, I had this really cool thing where I had opened for him a couple of times at this time, but I'd never met him because, he's in the bus until he goes on, and he doesn't typically, anyway. So he did this workshop at the B.B. King Museum in Indianola, and I'm sitting on the front row, right? And he literally, like, I still have it. It's in my pick case right there. He hands me one of his picks, like right to me, and we're sitting there talking about favorite songs and how he learned to read music in 8th grade because he played clarinet, and it was a surreal moment. So he's like the one that's always like, that's what makes that album for me is B.B. King, not Eric Clapton.
Yeah, I got to see him. So I graduated high school in 2008, and that summer my dad and I did a father-son trip to Chicago, and we went to the Chicago Blues Fest, and I'll never forget it. It was such a fun time. And we just walked around, and at that time I was playing guitar, and I was a guitar player, but I didn't, being a musician wasn't on my radar. I was 18, but I didn't know any musicians. I didn't know that was something you could do. And so I was about to go to college, and my dad and I did this awesome father-son trip, and I saw B.B. King play there. That was the first time I saw him. And I remember thinking, it was 2008, and I remember thinking like, wow, this is something that I will tell people about for the rest of my life. Like, I got to see B.B. King play. And then I saw him later here in Atlanta. He opened for Tedeschi Trucks Band. And at the time, she was my girlfriend, Tilly, but my now wife was with me. And I remember walking away from that show being like, you got to see B.B. King.
Right.
That's huge, Even Clapton, like we went and saw Clapton a few weeks ago here in Atlanta. It's like, I've seen him 3 or 4 times now. And it's that thing of, I have been in the room with Eric Clapton and got to see him play and hear him play in real time. Like, I lived through that. And that's, unfortunately, that's not going to be, future generations won't be able to say that about a lot of these people. It's like we look back at Hendrix with reverence, like, oh man, what would it have been like to see Hendrix play? Well, we have had the opportunity to see these people play. And it's
an unbelievable opportunity, but I think we're starting to see some more that are going to be on that radar. Derek Trucks, I think, is going to end up being one of those at some point. Somebody's going to be like, you saw Derek Trucks play? Yep. I saw him play in a tiny little theater.
Dude,
in Memphis,
I saw him. So
you know
full circle moment, 2007. one of my first concerts was Eric Clapton. Clapton came and played Atlanta, and it was when it was Doyle Bramhall, Derek Trucks, Willie Weeks on bass, and Steve Jordan on drums. I mean, and I didn't know who Willie Weeks or Steve Jordan was, right? This is before, right. I mean, I just didn't know. And I didn't know who Derek Trucks or Doyle Bramhall was. But I remember being at that show thinking like, holy shit, who is that blonde dude playing slide? Like, what is that? So he came in, I think it was like September of 2007. Then New Year's Eve that year from 2007 to 2008, Derek Trucks band, pre-Tedeschi Trucks band, Todd Smalley on bass, Enrico Scott on drums, Kofi Burbridge, rest in peace, on and Enrico, rest in peace. They played the Fox Theater in Atlanta. My parents went, and I have to shout out my parents, man. Like once I found music and I found guitar, my parents like really embraced that, and they supported me, and they still support me to this day. And so once I found music and guitar, it's like we all started going to concerts as a family. So we went to Derek Trucks band, and I still have the T-shirt from that show.
Oh, that's cool.
At Fox Theater in Atlanta, Derek Trucks band, New Year's Eve, North Mississippi All Stars opened. It was.
We're gonna cover them here in a second too. I want to mention them.
So I've seen Derek play probably 15 times now. I've seen Tedeschi Trucks 10 or 11 times, and every time I get the opportunity to go, I go.
Well, and they're Georgia folks, so they live over in Georgia. So
well, they're in Jacksonville. They're in Florida.
They still live over there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
But the bass player, the new bass player, Brandon Boone, I believe it is. He's an Atlanta guy. The new keys player, Gabe Dixon. He's not from Atlanta, but I got to do a few shows with Gabe and Noah back in the day. So it's cool to see.
Oh, very
cool.
And
then the drummer Falcon is an Atlanta guy. He got his name Falcon from Colonel Bruce Hampton, who was an Atlanta staple. So it's really cool to see that band and see nobody I really know per se, but people that are kind of in the ethos, start to come up through that band. It's really, really cool to see.
Yeah. I saw, a buddy of mine, Marshall, his dad owned the music store in Clarksdale. Actually, still owns the music store in Clarksdale where I grew up. It's a secondhand store. They do lots of used funky stuff. He and I spent so much time in there as late teens and early 20s, like playing all the vintage stuff that comes through. And so I've gotten to play a lot of really, really cool gear because it's been through that shop, or I've owned a lot of really cool gear because it's come through there. But Marshall and I went to Memphis and to the New Daisy Theater, which does not exist anymore, which breaks my heart, to see Derek Trucks band. And I had been wanting to see him for a long time, and Marshall was actually unfamiliar with him. And we went and watched, and, they did what they do and just absolutely blew people's minds. I actually have the bootleg recording of that show and still listening to it. I'm like, holy shit. Because they do board recordings, and they're up on like archive.org or whatever. And I found the one. It was up like 2 days after the show. It's great. So, but we came away. We're driving back, and it's like an hour and a half home to Clarksdale. And like we're in Memphis. We're leaving Memphis. We're hitting the highway, and we'd just been silent since we left the show. And Marshall finally looked and he said, usually when I go see an incredible guitarist, I want to either go home and do nothing but practice for hours, or I want to quit. He said, I don't feel either one of those things. And he said, because the way he plays is so foreign to my concept of how a guitar is played that he may as well have been playing.
No, it's true. It's true. It's like Derek Trucks. We are witnessing, with Derek Trucks specifically, we're witnessing one of the greatest guitar players to ever live, period. He is our modern day, whoever you want to point to, Hendrix, Clapton, Jeff Beck, whatever. Like, but what those guys were in their time, Derek is now. And I in that band, because I've seen them through most of the iterations of Tedeschi Trucks band. I saw them on one of their first tours where it was O'Teal Burbridge on bass, Kofi on keys, and it might have even been it was Falcon, and then I think there was another drummer before JJ Johnson, and And I think that was the first time I saw them. And then of course I saw them with Tim LaFave and Kofi and JJ, and dude,
Yeah.
Derek, and I've seen Derek talk about this in interviews before, of like kind of feeling like there's like that rhythm section, there's a freight train behind him, and he's kind of like trying to stay ahead of the freight train. It's like, no, I get it. Like, you've got Oteil Burbridge and Falcon and JJ Johnson or Tim LaFave or Brandon Boone.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot imagine playing on that stage with those people. So yeah, I hold that band very, very close to my heart.
Yeah, I've told people multiple times that I said it about the Derek Trucks band, and now I say it about the Tedeschi Trucks band, because I mean, you add in Susan Tedeschi, and who can absolutely sing the phone book and make it sound incredible. That is the best live band touring the world right now.
In terms of band of musicians on a stage playing live music and improvising, you're right. I completely agree. I would put Marcus King Band in that category as well.
Yep.
There's a few other bands that I would put there, but not talking about the best show out there, the best artist, or no, just in terms of live band, people playing music and improvising in the room. I believe you're 100% right. I don't think there's anybody better than Tedeschi Trucks alive today.
I don't think so. Marcus King is another one that's on my radar. I'm really ticked. He played Jackson, Mississippi a couple of years ago at Dueling Hall, which is like a 200 cap seat room, right?
So I have a funny story about Marcus King.
Dang it.
I met Marcus King when he was 15. I was interning at Rick Beato's studio. And at the time, Marcus, who's from Greenville, South Carolina, which is right up the road,
Right.
I believe they were like shopping producers for his first record or whatever. And I was at Rick's that day interning. He was like, hey, I got a meeting, vacuum the control room, whatever, just, I got a meeting. I'm going to be locked away. And they had finished their meeting, and Marcus, when they were leaving, was walking through Rick's vocal booth as I was coming in, and we just kind of met in the control room. And I was like, oh, hey man, nice to meet you. He was like, oh, what's up, man? Nice to meet you. And then we just went our separate ways. And then I never thought about him again, never heard about him or anything, until I was on the Joe Bonamassa Blues Cruise it's called Keeping the Blues Alive Cruise. I just call it Blues Cruise because, with Muddy Magnolias, we were on the cruise, and that was like January of 2016, 2017 or whatever. And it was the opening night. We had just played a set, and I was walking around the boat, and I heard this band absolutely just fucking burning. Like it was like a siren call. I just heard it, and I was like, who the hell? I heard the bass line first, and I heard just this burning bass line. I was like, what the hell is going on over there? And so I walked over, and it was Marcus, and they were playing this tiny little stage in this little bar on the boat, and Marcus had his back turned to the crowd, and he was taking a solo, they were improvising, and I stood there just like, oh my God. This is some of the, and it wasn't just Marcus's playing, it was the whole band.
Yeah, whole band.
Was unbelievable. And I caught up with him on the boat later, and we caught up, and then later that year, Muddy Magnolias, we did a few shows with them. We did their first family reunion festival and everything. And I haven't seen him in a couple years since then. But yeah, it's been cool to see him from like 15 years old, then become the next like phenom guitar player out there,
So Marcus King was one of those bands that came across my Spotify playlist. It was like recommended for you in like the daily, what do they call it? Your weekly discovery list or whatever. I try to listen to that every so often, especially if I've in the last few weeks been listening to music I really love, unlike when I'm prepping for gigs and I've been listening to music I have to listen to for a cover gig or like a church gig or something like that. I'm like, I'm not going to listen to the Discovery Weekly this week because it's just nothing but that stuff. I don't need to hear more Bon Jovi. It's fine. But I remember hearing him and being like, holy shit. What is this? And then looking him up and then trying to reconcile what he looks like and what he sounds like.
Yeah, he's very young.
He's so young.
But it's been cool the past couple of years. It's been cool to see him. Like, he did that record with Dan Auerbach, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I think they might have a new record coming out at some point soon, but yeah, it's really cool to watch him kind of really find his ground and start to just go, you know. And for me, you know, I'm 31 years old, and you know, that's one of the first times I remember seeing someone, him and Gary Clark Jr. Do you remember
Yeah.
Stumble Upon? Did you ever use Stumble Upon on like the internet back in the day?
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's like
I
a
do
plugin
remember.
you'd put on Google Chrome and you'd click it and it would just take you to a random website. So
Yep.
in 2010, I was at music school and I was like up late one night and I was just on my laptop and I hit Stumble Upon. And it took me to Gary Clark Jr.'s website. And at the time, he had like just put out the EP that had Bright Lights on it. And it might have even been before he played Crossroads that year, because this would have been like spring of 2010. And I believe he played Crossroads that year, that summer. And that is what like really kind of put him on the map, I think. One of the things that really put him on the map. But I remember us being like, oh my God, what is this? This is awesome. And I bought his EP on iTunes and started listening to Gary Clark Jr. And then same thing. I was like, I just watched his whole profile and that band just take off. Which now full circle, JJ Johnson is playing in Gary Clark Jr.'s band. You know, left Tedeschi Trucks and is in Gary's band. You know, it's a whole thing.
Gary was one of those that I discovered. It had to be a little later than that. I had to actually just look up the date to make sure I get this right. So that club that I ran sound for in Clarksdale was on one of the stops on the Flaming Lips tour when they broke that record for most concerts in a 24-hour period. And Gary was the opening band at in Clarksdale. This tiny 175 seat bar that, you know, I've played a million times, and I was the assistant manager and audio engineer there. I wasn't at the time though. I'd left those by then and gone back to college and then was working. But so I go and I see if any of my listeners are Flaming Lips fans, I'm sorry. I don't care. It was not why I was there. I was there to hear Gary Clark Jr. And so it was interesting because nobody knew who he was. He played this gig. This is 2012, but this is still small town Mississippi. They're mostly there because, our local bar is part of this stop for a world record thing, so everybody's showing up, right? He absolutely murdered it. Just left it all, and then sat at the bar drinking a beer. And so I just sat and talked to him for 20 minutes.
That was,
you know?
So we went on tour with them with Jesse, and we opened for them for for just a week. It was like eight shows or something like that. And Zapata, I've gotten to know Zapata through the YouTube channel, and we've become really good friends. He was actually just here a couple weeks ago. Like, he stayed at our house and we hung out, and I've become pretty close friends with him. But what was really cool, you know, we went on tour, we were direct support opening for them, playing these big venues, this whole thing. And, you know, at this point, by 2019, I think this was August of 2019, Gary's huge, right? I mean, he's a massive success. He's a big deal. He's on the level of Derek Trucks and like these, you know, phenom modern day guitar heroes. But every night after the gig, he and Zapata and the band would hang out with us. We would all just hang, and it was a similar experience. Like I in Council Bluffs, Iowa, I sat on a road case and shot the shit with Gary, talking about like being married on the road and what that's like. He and I talked for like an hour, and he was incredibly nice. And it's so awesome to, first of all, to know these people and sort of almost idolize them and their music and what they do, and have the world respect for them, and then meet them in real life and realize like, oh, these are just, dude, they're just guitar players. Like, they're just like us. You know, they've found success in their career because they're incredibly talented. They're incredibly hardworking. You know, they've got what it takes. But at the end of the day, these people are just people like you and I that are interested in the same shit. They listen to the same stuff that we do. You know, we sit and talk guitars, we talk gear, whatever. It was a really cool experience. It was a good sort of meet your heroes moment.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to say. You know, they said don't meet your heroes, and that's very true sometimes, but I've been like you, the experience you had, I've been really lucky. Some of the heroes that I have met have turned out to be some of the most sincere, warm, nice people I've ever
Yeah.
met. I was gonna bring one back to you that we were talking. This is a great segue to it. Talking about the North Mississippi All Stars. So I know Cody and Luther, and I knew Chris Chu, their original bassist. I probably of my know best. I know Lightning Malcolm, who plays bass for them a ton now. Lightning Malcolm and Cedric Burnside used to have a hill country thing, and Malcolm's an interesting dude. I want to get him on the podcast real bad. I can't seem to. He and I have talked about it, just haven't got him on yet. That episode is going to be off the wall, cool, fun. But you know those. Luther and Cody, and I met those guys, knew who they were. We were doing those shows in LA, right? And this producer that we were working with, Karen Rockman, had us come to Sunset Sound Studio. My sister was cutting some vocal demos and stuff, possibly for a movie. They're working on. I never even saw the movie Barnyard or some animated kids thing. Anyway, or at least an animated movie. But the All Stars were in studio recording for this soundtrack, and so it was crazy because I had to go to L.A. to meet these guys that are in this band an hour away from where I live. Like, you know, like we'd run into each other a ton, but so hang out, talk with them, exchange phone numbers. Never were able to connect again. That's fine. You know, they're all super busy, and we were doing this alt rock thing. I don't know why they'd ever want to hang out with us. Well, fast forward a few years, and Luther Dickinson, who I've always associated hardcore with that hill country, loose, real kind of gritty, you know, chaos, borderline falling apart. Next thing I know, he's in my favorite band of all time. He's playing in the Black Crowes. And so Black Crowes I've seen live a few times post getting back together after the big breakup in the 90s. And I saw them went to see them at New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. And the show was terrible. It was horrible. Steve Gorman had not come back yet at that time, and it was the drummer from the Chris Robinson solo project, who's a great drummer in his own right, but it just didn't mesh. It didn't meld. And so, like, Chris is turning around yelling at the drummer for to play the rhythm right or something. It's like, oh, it was a train wreck. So I went and saw them in Arkansas, and it was the lineup by the time it got back to Arkansas, right? Saw them in Little Rock, and it was Chris, and it was Rich, and Mark Ford, Sven Pipien's playing with them again. You got Steve Gorman on drums again, and keys player. He's passed away since now. I can't think of it, though. Anyway, they're back together and just absolutely.
Dude, I just saw them a month ago, and
did you
love the Black Crowes? Dude, and right when I graduated high school, early college, I went through a Black Crowes phase. I discovered the Black Crowes stuff, and I'm from Atlanta, right? I'm from north of Atlanta. They're from Marietta. They're from a town 20 minutes away from me, right? The Robinson brothers, born and raised there, right? But because I didn't have any musical context or any guidance in the city, I didn't know anything about Atlanta and Atlanta music and Atlanta bands or Brendan O'Brien or Southern Tracks or any of the Studio One, anything that Atlanta gave the rock and blues and Southern rock scene. I didn't know anything about. So when I found the Black Crowes, I deep dove. So I am a massive Black Crowes fan, and I got the chance. My wife and I and Rick got to go see them a few weeks ago and stand in the sound booth because the front of house engineer, Dave Natal, is a fan of Rick's channel and a fan of my channel. And so we got to go see them. And it was like, it was like a religious experience for me, seeing the Crowes and the guitar player that they have right now. I just looked him up on Instagram, Isaiah Mitchell. Okay. He's the dude playing all of Brendan O'Brien's parts, and he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting on guitar. Unbelievable guitar player. That sound, the sort of like Dwayne Allman adjacent kind of sound that all those, it's the Shake Your Money Maker tour is what they're on right now. So they're playing the entire Shake Your Money Maker record and then some of their other hits. And dude, I was just beside myself. Chris Robinson sounds as good as he ever has. The band was tight. Rich Robinson had every guitar you could imagine. His tone was just unbelievable. He had Dave, the front of house engineer, was telling us that that night he had added a new amp to his rig. He had bought a vintage Bluesbreaker, Marshall Bluesbreaker, from Rusty Anderson, the guitar player from Paul McCartney's band, and it was their first night using it. So his rig was a vintage Bluesbreaker, a hand-wired AC30, and then a 200-watt Marshall Major with a 412. All three amps were on the whole time and just blasting. And the stage volume coming off of Rich Robinson's rig was like, even back at the sound booth, was like, it would peel paint off your face. It was amazing, but they sounded so good. And I was screaming the whole time, like singing along, but oh God, I love the Black Crowes so much, man.
See, that's why I love Rich Robinson, but like, I love Mark Ford. I am such an incredible fan of Mark Ford's guitar playing. Because he's on what it's slightly controversial, and people like what they like. My favorite albums are, Southern Musical and Harmony Companion, Three Snakes, One Charm, and Amorica. To me, that's the three that make up like the trilogy of. They've done some great stuff. I've got the other stuff. I thought Warpaint was a good return record. Even like Lions and By Your Side, they get a little flack. They're not bad. But like that lineup from those three albums. So when I saw Mark Ford with them playing those parts,
dude, and
he's blasting the stage with like 3 Roccaforte 100-watt half stacks. It's like, oh my God, it's there's nothing like that experience. And when I saw him in Arkansas, it was great because the band before them was Seether, and they had just kind of had that hit with Amy Lee. And Amy Lee's from Arkansas, Central Arkansas, so she came out and sang with them. And like we got there a little later than we wanted to, and we couldn't get near the stage. And my buddy Marshall, actually, who went to see Derek Truck's band with me, he's the one who got me into the Black Crowes. He's the one that turned me on to a lot of the classic rock and Black Crowes. He got me into Led Zeppelin. He got me into all that stuff. Because my life, like you were talking about albums in cars, my mom had Patsy Cline's greatest hits in the car. That's what
that is nothing to sneeze at, my friend.
No, I still love that album. And I still have a cassette copy of it now because it's just one of those things. But so went to see them live, and Marshall's a little bummed. We're really far back, right? I'm like, Marshall, I want you to look at this crowd. This looked like the crowd that's going to stick around to see the Black Crowes when Seether's done. Like everybody has like wallet chains and like studded wrist bracelets, and I'm like, just hold up. Sure enough, we were 3 rows from the stage by the time Seether finished, and we just walked right up, and it was just face meltingly good. And I saw them a few years later in Memphis with Luther playing all the parts, all of Mark Ford's parts. And I was actually really worried because I knew of Luther as this loose, hill country blues guy. I was like, is this gonna mesh?
Dude,
no, killed it. Absolutely.
That's a gig. So I have a list of bands and gigs that, if by some just utter miracle the stars aligned and I ever got the call to go, I would drop everything. The YouTube channel, everything I would just drop and just go do that. And the Black Crowes are one of those. And I feel like as a guitar player, I was watching Isaiah Mitchell play and I was thinking like, dude, this guy's a smoking player, but like give me a week, give me 2 weeks to like get the parts down and get the songs down. And I could step into that role right now. And that's, if I had to point to one kind of sound that is like me as a guitar player, sort of just holistically wrapped up, it's that like Black Crowes lead guitar, mix of slide, playing lead, that kind of stuff. I loved it so much, man. It was so good. So good.
It doesn't make sense how good they are. And I think part of it is that tension between the brothers that never seems to go away. They're fine for a while, then they're not, then they're fine. It's very much America's Oasis with better guitar tones.
That's a good way to put it. I haven't thought about it like that, but you're right. It's America's Oasis.
Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah, it's 100% the American Oasis. There's always an American equivalent to every UK band. And that's our equivalent.
But it's but the thing,
Elton John,
right?
And Billy
but it's
Joel
the thing of the Black Crowes is it's the perfect combination. And if any of our listeners are like not super hip to the Black Crowes or they haven't given the Crowes a chance, I would encourage you to go back and listen with a critical ear, because it is the perfect combination of incredible songwriting. Those songs are amazing, you know.
Get the lyric sheets, because I understand Chris Robinson singing. If you haven't been listening to it a lot, it may.
But
take you a little
even
to hear what he's
musically,
saying.
like listen to the arrangements and listen to the parts and listen to the production on those records and listen to the sound, the guitar tones, the drum sounds, the vocal production. Like those are incredible classic records that will stand the test of time. And you can go see the Crows now. They're not like in their 70s or 80s. They're like in their 40s, in their 50s, and they're out there doing it and they're crushing it.
And sound incredible. And I tell people all the time, my favorite album of all time is Southern Musical and Harmony Companion. I think it still holds up today just as strongly as it did in the 90s. I think it doesn't sound dated as much as some of the stuff that was coming out in the 90s does. That album could absolutely release this Friday and still sound relevant.
100%. Yeah, there's a whole lot of bands that are like that. I think, I think the Police are kind of like that too. Like you could drop the Police, having never heard the Police before. If you dropped, Synchronicity today, people would be like, "What is this? This is hip. This is sick. What is this?" Like, yeah, there's a lot of bands like that stand the test of time sonically and hold up.
I think so, especially for guitar players, as guitar is kind of resurging. In a way that I wasn't sure it ever would, to be honest.
2020 was the biggest year for guitar sales in history. So we're going to see, isn't it? In the next 5 to 10 years, as a lot of the people that picked up guitar last year, a lot of the young people that picked up guitar last year, we're going to see guitar come back, in my opinion, to the forefront of pop culture in a completely new and fresh way. And it's not going to look like it did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's not going to sound like it did. It's going to be new. It's going to be female. And I'm here for it, man. I am.
I think we're already seeing it with artists like her, with artists like
St. Vincent.
St. Vincent. Yeah, where, sure, like guitar's a big deal in their music. It's not necessarily in the forefront like, say, the Black Crowes, like we've been talking about, just to keep it relevant. Or most of the top of our heads. It's not like that, where it's like wall of guitar hitting you in the face, but it's still very much featured. It's still very much a part of not only their musicianship, but their image. They are associated with the instruments they play in a way that we haven't gotten with pop artists.
And they're pushing the envelope. Like St. Vincent, for example, I was watching there's a YouTube compilation of her and her fuzz tones, which I love. I love her like crazy out there. It's so just avant-garde and nuts and crazy. And I was watching this compilation, and I should know better as a YouTuber to avoid the comment section, but I scrolled down in the comment section and it was the part of guitar culture that I can't stand. Online guitar culture that I can't stand, which is like, I need to be careful here. It's
fine.
The middle-aged white dude who gets pissed at anything that doesn't sound like Zeppelin, or insert your favorite guitar player here. The comment section was nothing but people shitting on St. Vincent and her sound. This isn't music. This isn't guitar playing. This isn't XYZ. It's like, dude, do you realize like people were saying the same thing about Hendrix back in the day? Yeah. Like this is not new. This is people pushing the envelope, and this is their artistry and this is their sound. And just because it doesn't sound like Jimmy Page doesn't mean that it's not good.
Right. I talked about this with Jeremy Shepard, the guitar hunter. I had him on the podcast, and we talked about, and we were specifically talking about Gibson guitars. And we were talking about the fact that not that Gibson is a perfect company, because they're not. I genuinely believe they're working on it. I genuinely believe sometimes they don't know what they should be working on. That's fine. But I think Gibson's biggest problem isn't Gibson. It's the gatekeeping of some of the Gibson players and fans. And the way that it's like, oh, it's not this. Les Paul Studio is not a real studio. You got to buy the like crazy expensive one if you're going to really play
I think
guitar.
it's
Yeah, or
boomerism at its peak. And I say that not in terms of, so I think when people say like, okay, boomer or whatever, like this boomer or like, the boomer bins thing that's been going on.
yeah.
It, to me, that doesn't have anything to do with age. I know people that are in their 60s that don't think that way. It's not an age thing. It's a mentality thing. And look, I'm guilty of it myself. I sometimes joke that I am a baby boomer trapped in a millennial's body because of the music that I like, because of the sounds that I like. I get it. But I also understand that what I like and what I listen to is not indicative of what future generations and other people are going to like and what they do with the guitar. Like, dude, I love Zeppelin. I love the Black Crowes. I love Dwayne Allman and Derek Trucks and Cream and all this stuff. That's my thing, and I hold that and I cherish that. But I can also look at someone like St. Vincent who's doing something completely different than that and think, holy shit, that's rad. That is rock and roll. That is sick. I am into that by all means, like, because what she's doing now is going to inspire a new generation of guitar players.
Yep.
Like, absolutely, go do your thing. There's a lot of players on Instagram right now that are doing, the super fast, crazy tapping DI guitar sound kind of thing. Admittedly, that's not my sound. That's not what I think sounds, what I would go for in terms of tone or style or playing. But the reality is those players are getting hundreds of thousands and millions of views doing that kind of sound. And that's only good for guitar. It's keeping guitar relevant.
Yep.
It's keeping the instrument and musicianship and the idea of picking up an instrument and working on it every day of your life, coming home from school and immediately picking your guitar up and neglecting your homework because all you want to do is play guitar. That thing we all did. Those players are doing that for a new generation of people. So who am I to say like, oh, well, that's not good. Like, that's not good tone, or that I'm not into that kind of things. Like, who cares, man? Who cares?
Right. It's keeping
keeping guitar going. It's keeping it relevant. And it's a big part of why I think so many people picked up guitars last year during the pandemic, and a big part of why people are going to stick with it and see it through. And we're going to see a new generation of musicians and artists that are young now. They're middle school, high school age now. And they're going to be the next generation of artists that come through, and they're going to have guitars in their hands because of that.
Absolutely. And I think it's a wonderful thing to see. And, I don't know. We haven't exactly seen those type of sales figures slow down. They're still up there. You can't get a hold of anything. There's no used gear out there. It's wild looking at, as someone who has bought and sold gear for the last 20 years, looking at what it looks like now. It's still selling. You can't keep things in stock. People are still getting into it. It's going to be a different world in the next 10, 15 years of what music looks like in the world of guitar in it.
So when I started making YouTube videos, I did it because it was something that I wanted to do, and I had a vision for it, and I was excited about it, and I felt like I had a voice and I had something to say, and I just wanted to say it and hope people would listen. And now that I look at where the landscape is, with new people coming in, it's almost scary to me that there's this many people that watch the videos or the podcast or whatever, because, there's a portion of the audience that are those people. They're the young people that like picked up guitars last year. I see it in my comments section every day. Hey, I just started playing guitar 6 months ago. How do I learn this? How do I do this? And, I'm speaking to you, and I'm speaking to other people that are in the guitar sort of social media and guitar quote influencer space. Like the stuff that you're putting out now and the things you're talking about now and the things you're showing now are going to influence, for better or for worse, the next generation of players. And so as the channel has grown, I've talked to other YouTuber friends of mine in the guitar space, and I kind of feel this, like, I don't know how to put it, but I want to make videos that I wish I could have seen when I was like 13 and 14 years old and just starting out as a guitar player.
Yeah.
And
Makes a lot of sense.
podcasts. Had podcasts been a thing when I was first learning guitar, dude, I would have dove so hard into the guitar podcast realm to try and learn everything I could.
Yeah. I wish, because not only that, I started in a small town where, I started playing in church because that was who played guitar.
Same with me.
That I knew around me. So that's how I started playing guitar. Actually, I started much later in life, which means I probably started about the same time you did. I didn't take up guitar till 1998.
Okay. I was
somewhere around that time.
Yeah, I'm 2002, 2003, so I was 12, 13, okay. 14, something like that.
Yeah. I was 18. I was graduated high school in 99, so but yeah, so we've been talking for a minute. I think at this point, I think that's a good point. We're going to wrap up the regular episode. Listeners, I really appreciate y'all hanging out. We are going to talk a little more on the Patreon episode where I am going to psychoanalyze what Tube Screamer actually hurt Rhett. And we're going to figure this out, y'all. So if you wanted all the gear talk, if you came here expecting gear talk, it's going to happen, but it's going to happen over on Patreon. So remember, you can go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast and you can donate and get all of the extra episode, including all the past episodes, bonus content. And that all goes to a good cause. Remember to go to Instagram, find the post for the giveaway, sign up, tell your friends, follow all the things. It's real simple. For Rhett, my name is Phillip. This is 40 Watt Podcast. Y'all be sure to be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and try to make some noise.